Hey, if you guys are tuning in, my name is Matt Peeples, and we're talking today about preaching for a live stream only audience. And I have been looking forward to this conversation all week because I love preaching, but I also know most of you do as well. And one of the challenges with preaching is when all of a sudden somebody completely changes the rules on you. I mean, up to a few weeks ago, what were we doing? You were preaching in a live audience and people were there, and maybe you were streaming it out, but you had a core there. And now it's you and a camera. And for some of us, that feels radically different. So what we did was we found some people who are not just great preachers, but they're also people that are great at doing preaching and speaking in front of a camera, tons of experience. So I want to introduce to you guys Matt Popovits and Chris Paavola. Matt has a great background. I want to share it with you. He was a theater major and has always done not just preaching, but all kinds of video style teachings and has just done that really well. And especially if you've never seen some of his video blogs, you need to check those out and some of the video podcasts because they're just incredible. So Matt, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And Chris has a worship arts background. And so he's been on all sides of the camera, all sides of the production aspect. I love the work, Chris, that you've done with Lutheran Hour Ministries and a lot of the vignettes that you guys put out on Facebook and social media. They were just incredible. And so Chris is somebody that's not only a great preacher, but he also knows how to do that for a camera only. And so Chris, thanks for taking time with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for asking.
Well, hey, I want to encourage you guys. I was on a call right before this, and I was helping a friend out with just some of the technical issues of getting online. And I know for a lot of you, it's been a whirlwind. Like your head is just spinning because 2 weeks ago, you could have cared less about video editing, and now you found yourself becoming a video editor. You found yourself having to learn about live stream and posting things online. And now all of a sudden it's, okay, now you mean the task of preaching might be different for a camera than it is for a live audience. And so I just want to encourage you, look, wherever you're at, you're in a good spot to start. This webinar is going to be a crawl, walk, and run kind of experience. And I want you to keep one thing in mind. The most important thing you're doing right now is just doing something online because your people need to hear from you. They don't need to hear from somebody else that may have better production or lighting or stuff like that. They want to see a familiar face, somebody that they've come to see week in and week out, somebody that they trust when it comes to teaching them about the Bible. And so our goal today is to help you do what you're doing and do it a little bit better because you are the person that needs to be there. And so wherever you're at, it's a great spot to start. Let's talk about how we can move forward. So I'm going to throw out just some questions to you guys. And where I want to begin, I had somebody who emailed me and said, hey, is this just about live stream? Or are you guys going to be talking about pre-recorded and live stream? And are those things going to be transferable? And I said, absolutely yes. So where I thought would be a great place for us to start is the things that affect whether you're pre-recording or live streaming. So what are some of the basic technique things that you guys are keeping in mind when it comes to maybe even just setting up the shots that you're using for preaching and live stream?
Well, I'll start. I think, for me, the number one thing is if you're truly live streaming, like we are now, the advantage of that is that you can have direct engagement with the people that you're talking to because it's happening live. And so if you're going to do that, lean into that opportunity. So set yourself up so that you can be actively responding before the sermon, after the sermon, or perhaps even during the sermon to the audience that's watching with you. I mean, that's really the one true advantage of going live. Otherwise, you kind of might as well pre-record it, make sure that all the tech stuff is buttoned down and as good as you can get it, and then premiere it on Facebook or YouTube or whatever platform that you're using. So I think the number one thing is if you're going live, try and find a way to lean into the fact that you are live and you can directly engage still with your people. From a shot setup standpoint, for me, there's really not much that's different between if we're going live like this or if we're recording something for use later. The two big things are make sure that they can see your face, that there's halfway decent lighting. You want the lighting behind the camera, not behind you.
Yeah.
And make sure that there's halfway decent audio. And audio is almost more important than the video, because we can deal with less than perfect pictures, but it's really hard for us to deal with less than perfect audio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's fundamentally important because, the more you Zoom, you start to kind of develop some like Zoom pet peeves. And so this is probably the most common mistake I see, guys, right here. It's like you've got the laptop there and it's like there's all this extra headroom. It's not really a great angle. And so like
I love
Matt's
looking
saying,
up your nose.
Yeah. You're welcome. I cleaned it out for you. And so what Matt's kind of saying is make sure you're just kind of framed like this. You see how there's not too much headroom there. There's enough for me to like kind of move around a little bit. And the closer the shot, I love how you said that, because when we went from an audience to live stream without an audience, one of the big things we did was we actually moved the camera angle in tighter.
Yep.
So that it would feel more intimate for the people that were sitting in the room. And so I think keep those kind of shots in mind.
If possible. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was actually going to say, I'm glad that you're showing what it looks like on Sunday morning in your setup, Matt, because I'm live streaming from my living room on Sunday mornings. And so I got 5 kids down there right now, and you guys don't want to see what that looks like. So, but there is a difference. I mean, it actually isn't that different than what you see right now in my shot. And so there is kind of it's 2 venues, and it shows just kind of like how tight I think you can get. I think you can get this tight on a shot. And if you are zoomed out, I would get no further than Matt is right now. That kind of sternum up, maybe waist high, but the more information you bring into the screen, the more opportunity there is for distraction. And
people communicate and engage with the eyes.
Right.
And so when you're in an auditorium, it's different. People can take in the whole sensory experience. But when you're not in an auditorium or a sanctuary, you don't have the whole experience helping kind of draw your focus in. But you have to find a way in a medium like this to help people connect with the eyes. So when we did VoxCon last year, a conference I run on communication, we worked with a guy from Sesame Street, and he talked about how important it is to have the eyes of the Muppets actually looking right at the camera. And he said, because the viewers will connect with that puppet as if it's real once the eyes lock in through the lens. And so they try to frame the shot so you can always see the eyes of the puppet looking directly at the lens. And he said the same thing works for human beings. And I find this to be really true. Make sure that they can see your eyes and they can see you looking at the camera. And if possible, in terms of framing your shot, make sure that the lens is at the same level and same angle as your eyes, so that people aren't looking up at you or down at you or sideways on you, but it's at the same level, same height as your eyes, and you're looking directly into that camera.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point, because I was watching a few live streams, and that's the big difference I noticed is, are you looking to the camera? And it becomes a challenge too. So if you have other people that are helping you lead worship, or just other people in the room, oftentimes what we default to is we default to like looking at the person that's there in person. And so actually, what you can do in that instance is I told one of our volunteers that, dropped off a volunteer. And so they're like, hey, I'll sit in the sanctuary and worship with you. I was like, thank you so much for worshiping with us. I am not going to look at you. I'm going to be looking at the camera, and it's nothing personal. It's just because if I'm not looking at the camera, it feels like I've disengaged from everybody else in worship, trying to engage with that one person. And I think the other thing to what you guys are saying about setting up shots is what's in the background.
Right.
So if you guys notice, like we're all in different settings, but there's not a lot going on in the background. We're looking at what light's coming in. We're looking at keeping it like clean and simple, because like Matt was saying, you don't want it to be too distracting back there.
Absolutely. If you have, I was watching a pastor do his thing on Sunday, and there was like a bookshelf in the background, and there was books knocked over, and there were some books, it was kind of disheveled. And I found myself like the entire time looking at his bookshelf and going, oh wait, I have that book, or you know what I mean? And it's just knowing that people are examining the entire screen, And they're way more, it's almost like the stain in your living room carpet that you stop seeing because you're so familiar with it. But everyone, when they come into your house for the first time, they walk by and they're like, oh my goodness, this dude's got a coffee stain on his carpet. You need to take care of this. And it's the same exact thing. We become blind to our own environment. And so it's like looking with that lens. And I think just in general, kind of going back to your basic technique setup question is, like there's that watch commercial. It was the first commercial ever aired in 1941. First TV commercial was a Bolova, I think is how you pronounce it, TV commercial. And they literally just took a camera and pointed it at a newspaper and ran it for 10 seconds and then said something like America runs on Bolova or something like that. And that was the first TV commercial. They pointed a camera at a newspaper and they made the mistake of assuming what engages people in one medium will engage people in another medium in the same way. And we have to recognize that even though our message is the same, even though our message is unchanging and eternal, the medium is different, and we have to approach it as like just embracing it for what it is. It is informal. It is interpersonal. It is a conversation, and the medium is different.
That's, I think that's a huge point, because I think sometimes that's where we make some of those mistakes, right? Is because we want to create that same feel, but we don't realize the feel translates differently when we're doing it on the screen. We've got a great question in here from James Kent, who put in our Q&A. He said, we're streaming from our sanctuary with an accompanist and a couple of singers. The idea so that people can see where they normally worship, thinking that this was a comfort to them in this time. How would the tightness change?
Matt, you want to talk about this since you stream actually from your sanctuary?
Yeah, so actually we don't. Our sanctuary is being renovated right now. And so we were already worshiping in a temporary space when we had to shift to live stream. And so actually we've commandeered our youth room and turned it into a television studio, essentially, where across from me there's a setup for our musicians, and over here there's a preaching station, and over there there's like a tech area. What I would say though is I think there's some wisdom in saying let's stream from our sanctuary, because that's where we worship and that's very familiar to people. So I think that's good, but I would try to find a way in the shots that you use to make sure that trying to capture the space doesn't get in the way of the people watching connecting with you or the other people who are leading the service. So if you have just one camera that's trying to grab the whole room, I would probably try and focus it in on a particular portion of the space so the shot can be a bit tighter, and your presence or the presence of other people leading can fill that frame a little more. And then making sure that when you do preach, you are, even if that camera feels very far away, even if you feel like despite how tight you've gotten the shot, you're still small on the screen, you are looking directly at that camera and speaking to it, not speaking to a crowd that doesn't exist while the rest of the people online watch you.
Yeah, right.
No, speak to that camera. If necessary, move other people who are helping to lead that service into that single camera shot that you have. If you can move the piano over, or if perhaps you can move some of your leading of the worship and liturgy over closer toward the accompanist or the organ or the other person who's leading, so that you can, in the same shot, go back and forth in your leadership. I'd consider some of those things. I think there's some wisdom in keeping it in the same space, but make sure that you're producing it for someone who's watching it on a device.
So yeah, I've gotten this question from a couple guys of like, hey, should I do this from the sanctuary? Should I do this, at home? I lean towards, though I understand reasons for the sanctuary, I lean towards living room. And there's a few reasons why. One, I know myself. When I am in a big room, I will start to speak like it. And I'm affected by my environment. Churchill's famous quote, we build our buildings and afterwards they build us, or they shape us. It changes the way I act. And I start to get a little bit more performative or a little bit louder than I would. It's like, the Ethiopian eunuch in Philip, he invites him to come sit with him. And that's what people are doing. They're inviting us to come sit with them in their living rooms. And so if we reflect the same space that we're in our environment, then I think we'll reflect that as well in the tone and having that more conversational approach. It's just a little bit easier for me personally. And I think there is a value in what it also communicates. And again, I understand the reasons for the sanctuary, that it also communicates, hey, the church goes on, and the church is still active and live in your homes right now. Look, the church is here in my home, and it's a chance to connect on a deeper level with people and get a little bit more human. I think that's just kind of why I've chosen to stream from my living room.
No, I love that you brought up streaming from the living room, because I think it's a really great way to stream as well. I mean, we're all going to be streaming from different spots, even though we're in our sanctuary. Like, we've got our worship leader off in one section, and I'm off in a different section of the front area, because, you know, what we realized is when we set up like normal, it looked weird on the video because he was like right behind me, and people are like, it feels like he's literally over your shoulder.
Yeah, I saw it. No, I watched it. It was good, man.
Yeah.
Like, you got the changes you guys make was good. Yeah.
So little adjustments like that. I think the golden thread you're going to hear here is your setting is far more powerful when you're preaching for live stream only than it even was when a live audience would come in. So be aware of that, and be aware of some of the things you're communicating. But I watched the Point Knox. They did an all living room setup, and it was incredible.
So good.
It was an
So
awesome
good.
worship experience.
Really good.
And so I would say, just, you know, if you've got an area where you're going to get better lighting, and you're going to be able to be a little bit more comfortable as a preacher, and put more people at ease, just like Chris is saying, you should totally do that.
I just want to take back everything I said and just defer to what Chris said, because Chris was really spot on. No, for real. Like, you're so true in that understanding that people are watching this in a casual environment in their living room, or sitting at their breakfast table on an iPad watching this,
maybe on their bed, on their phone, you know, that's super intimate, man.
Yeah. And making sure that what you're presenting, if possible, matches that, right? And they'll connect with that a little more. So perhaps if you are in the sanctuary, an idea could be, could you bring the camera down to create a shot where you are sitting preaching from one of the pews? Right? And the camera is close, and you're sitting there, and it's much more casual, like it would be in the living room, but you see the sanctuary like in the background, right? And if you, and then when it's time for the song to happen, somebody else kind of just shifts over into the frame and sings along with the hymn, and sings with you. And now you're sitting together. You're sitting in the pew that they can't be in, but you're still sitting together, them on their couch, them with you, and you're creating a very similar environment between the two of you. If you can create that, maybe. You accomplish both things.
That's incredible. This is why we do these webinars, so I can steal all these great ideas and incorporate. No, I love this. And so we're going to do just one more basic technique issue before we start diving into differences in structure and kind of start diving into some of the deeper level kind of preaching stuff. But James Kent shot us another question. He says, we're also using slides to help people sing along, respond in prayers, participate in worship. Any thoughts on that? So how do you guys incorporate those that within that kind of preaching task or just worship task?
Yeah, I think an invitation is necessary. I've watched a lot of streams where they just go into the song, or a lot of services where they just go into the song, and that's fine. But I think there's people who are doing this for the first time. They've never, ever watched a live stream, or they saw somebody's post on Facebook that said, hey, join me. And they're like, what's this church all about? And if this is their first time, truly their first time, we would say things, and we were in a physical environment, we would say things like, please rise as we join in worship, or, hey, we're going to start with some singing right now. I know this is brand new to you, but maybe the last time we did this was at karaoke, but this is something we do to kind of center our hearts and bring ourselves together. So I want to invite you to sing with us. You would have some type of invitation before the song, and whether it's the host doing it, the MC, the pastor, or, you know, the singer, just on a very basic level, keep doing it. Yes. Have the lyrics. Yes. But make sure there's an invitation before it.
Yeah. What we do is we have a program that allows us to overlay the lyrics on the screen kind of line by line. But what I've seen work just as well is churches choosing music for their live stream service that is well known by the people who are in their church and easy to pick up, even if you're not a person who's connected to their church. So really familiar, really singable tunes knowing that people are probably going to feel a little bit weird or uncomfortable singing from their couch. You want to make it as accessible for them as possible. And then just providing like a PDF that they can open from their phone, from their tablet ahead of time, that lists out all the lyrics. One of the best live streams that I've seen over the last couple of weeks is from my friend Mike Rosina, who runs a church in Lower Manhattan that's changing its name to Good Shepherd, New York. But right now they're streaming on a website called digitalchurch.nyc. And there, you'll notice there's no lyrics on the screen.
Oh, man.
There's no text on the screen. There's nothing. They've just chosen very familiar refrains and tunes that people can easily pick up. And they have a PDF that you can open and follow along. But it's very easy to just watch and then pick up the tune that they're singing and just kind of hum it or sing it along with them. They do a really good job of leading people through worship without a whole lot of bells and whistles. Digitalchurch.nyc. Check it out. They do a really, really good job.
I'm buying Digital Church STL as we speak.
Seriously, that's a brilliant idea. That's why we do it. It's
so
there better be a lot of digital churches after this, right? So, and the last thing we'll say on technique, Peter Kauser asked about, when you're talking about how you're framing everything, he said, because some people are watching on small phones, what are your thoughts on projecting words? And I think, we kind of talked a lot about that, but I will say in a production standpoint, always kind of err toward the smallest screen. Because you do have to, like, a lot of times and this is like video production across the board, a lot of times we err to like the big screen. So it's like, oh, okay, this looks good on the big screen. But, my biggest question is, how does it look on this size screen on my smartphone?
Which is why the tight shot matters too. Yeah.
Yeah. Because right now, as I'm looking at our Zoom call, for me in our kind of back end mode here on Zoom, Matt and Chris are about the size I would see them on my phone. And because of the way they framed their shots, like, they're very clear and engaging to me. Whereas if they were even, the farther back I go, it's almost like a multiple here. Like, it really disconnects. So that shot's important. Hey, let's talk about the actual sermon structures. Like, what has shifted in your preaching and teaching when you talk about designing the message when it comes to preaching for live stream only?
I'll jump in first here, and then Matt can, have better ideas after I'm done. And then everyone just could listen to that instead. But I'll say that a lot of my live streaming stuff that I'm doing now is because I've spent the last year doing a YouTube channel called What Jesus Says About. And the reason I say that is it's made me extremely analytical about the actual video content, and not in a to get out of the ethereal theoretical stuff, but like after every video is published, YouTube will publish analytics for your video. And you can see on there, where are people dropping off, and where are people like staying on, and why did they stay on, and did that call to action work or not work, and did that end screen work or not work, and all of that matters. And so, I'm looking at the analytics, and I'm able to go, okay, there's a drop off, but it's conditioned me to go, man, people have the shortest attention span for your content, especially if they don't know you. And how many of this is an opportunity for outreach. Yeah, absolutely. Which means we've got to be on our A game with retention rates and retention rates on our content. And so that means, like in the YouTube world, they say every 7 seconds, you should be changing your shot or adding some new graphic on the screen. Well, you can't do that in preaching, but you can sit there and go, okay, well, where are the moments? And so kind of even backing up a little bit further, just like YouTube has an algorithm, Facebook has an algorithm. There's a million line code algorithms in action the moment you press live on your video. And Facebook is deciding, based on some of the information it's receiving from viewers, whether to show your video to more people and whether to put it in their live stream or in their newsfeed. And based upon its performance with the first initial batch of people, it will decide how to release that video to other people. And so if your video is hitting on all these good metrics, then it will release it and show it to more people. But Facebook in and itself is not a good outreach tool until you've proven you've got a little bit of social proof.
Mm-hmm.
And the big ones that we know of on Facebook that we can gauge and that we can measure, because you can't really see where retention rates are very well in Facebook Live videos, but you can measure comments. That's the number one most important thing. Facebook believes comments, they're going, okay, hey, this is interactive and comment or content. People are engaging with it. Number two is retention. We can't see that, but we can see how many people are still watching our video at the end and how's that number doing. Number three is likes and hearts. So is this video just getting a lot of likes and hearts? Are people pumping it? And then shares, but shares is the least engaging. They want likes, or they want comments, they want retention, and they want likes and shares more than anything else. And so figuring out a way in your preaching to incorporate those things, ask for comments, ask for likes, ask people to stay with you. Even if it's pre-recorded, this is something you can do to boost you in the Facebook algorithm.
Yeah. And if it's pre-recorded, you actually have a strong opportunity for that, in that get your staff on the Facebook live feed or wherever you're doing it. So if we're on YouTube, Facebook, and we're on the church online platform, so we have a staff member on each one of those when the service is going live to engage with it. And if the service is pre-recorded, like our Monday, Thursday will be, we'll be on there at the same time when it's coming out for everybody. And we will be engaging with those comments and getting people to kind of engage back with us. And so that helps too.
What I would say is I would try to keep in mind three things when it comes to preaching online. It would be time, engagement, and dynamic. Time, engagement, and dynamic. And so I want to reiterate Chris's point that people's attention spans are really short. Overall, my preaching, whether it's live in a sanctuary or on a camera like this, has gotten shorter. Simply because I'm trying to challenge myself to be clearer, quicker in my preaching and communication. And also because I believe people's attention spans are shorter. It's even more so when they can take the preacher and just set him aside because he's on their phone, right? The ability to check out quickly and often is exponentially higher when someone's watching you on a video than when they're sitting in a sanctuary, right? So my preaching has gotten shorter and shorter and shorter. I think the ideal length for an online message is probably about 20 minutes, and that might even be pushing it. And if you watch our streams the last 2 weeks, I've gone longer than that, and you can see engagement drop off on those metrics precipitously right around the 18 to 20 minute mark. So think about time, think about being concise and clear. The second thing is, like Chris said, is to promote engagement while you're preaching. You can say things like, when you use an example of, I've always loved this as a kid, and I always hated this as a kid. In the comments below, tell me what was your favorite thing to do in the summertime as a kid. Even if you never reference it again, never look at it, just encourage them to stay engaged in whatever way in which you can, recognizing that they're watching on a platform that allows for that. So speak directly to that at multiple points throughout the sermon. And then the third thing is dynamic. Listeners need a change in pace, a change in tone, a change in format every few minutes. And so just be mindful of the fact that your 18 to 20 minute sermon really needs to be about probably comprised of 4 different types of delivery. It doesn't have to, they don't all 4 have to be different, but you probably have to change things up about 4 different times in the sermon to keep people retained. So if you start with 4 to 5 minutes of explanation, you need to shift to maybe narrative for the next couple of minutes. Then after that, maybe you can go back to some exhortation or explanation, and then maybe shift to an anecdote after that before you land the plane. And what happens when you remain dynamic in that, mindful of the fact that right here I'm exhorting at the beginning, and right here I'm telling a story, and then right here I'm explaining something, and right here I am encouraging. That's my tone. You're going to change and shift gears, and people will feel that in the presentation. Every time you shift gears as a communicator, it causes people to lift their eyes and go, wait, what's happening now? And you've re-engaged them for another minute or two. That's especially important in a medium like this, is to stay dynamic. Be mindful that every 3 to 4 minutes, I need to shift or change tone, approach in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and I think to what Matt's saying, content is still important, but you have to connect. Connection is equally important as content, and you have to connect first. because, whether you're talking about your preaching and teaching, or you're talking about a quick devotional thought on Facebook or YouTube, you have to make that connection, because if you don't make that connection, it makes it really difficult for people to want to kind of stay engaged. Because right now, even as we're running this webinar, I'm doing this webinar on the computer, and because of the way things are situated, my text messages are blasting on my computer screen. Notifications are happening on the phone. The second screen, I'm trying to,
So true.
it's like,
so true. Yeah.
Anytime you have a screen open, the way that it's been designed lately, it's like, ooh, bird. It's, all these different things that are going on that can distract your listeners. So time to connect is really important. Your content's important, but can you phrase it in a way that's memorable also? So something I found myself doing more now than ever before is I can't lean on the fact that I can look into a live congregation and kind of read people's faces and see whether or not they understood something, or see if we need a little more explanation here or there. I've got to just kind of assume, okay, what's the simplest and most memorable way I can make this point so that this point sticks with somebody? And some, like last night I was doing a message, and it was simply, saying what stands in the way of us being salt and light. It's all the can'ts instead of the can. And I used that rhythm intentionally. It was a little cheesy, and I actually had my media person drop the T off, because I wanted people to have that visual image of can't and can, so they would stick with the message longer and kind of remember it more. So I think those kind of things are also really important in your writing.
Yeah, you really just need to also just keep in mind that you're not preaching to a camera, you're preaching to a person who's on the other side of the lens, right? And so for me, I found it to be helpful to imagine a particular person on the other side of the camera, as if they're standing behind it taking the picture. And I just imagine that person. Usually I try to think of like the most skeptical person in my congregation or my community as the one who's standing behind the camera, and I'm preaching to him or to her and trying to imagine what their responses would be, and how a phrase as it flows out of my mouth might hit them, and trying to imagine that person on the other side of the lens and just preach to that one person with intentionality and specificity, knowing that the more intentional and specific I am towards a particular person in communication, the more relatable it is to all people in communication. That's just a principle of public speaking in general. Yeah. We tend to think that we need to be as broad as possible in how we communicate, so that we can connect with as many as possible. But the opposite is actually true. Human beings are so narcissistic that we read ourselves into virtually any situation. So as a communicator, the more specific, like highly specific you can get in your anecdotes and your examples and your illustrations, that you think this only applies to one human being who's ever lived. Everybody else, because it seems so real to one person, they will read themselves into that and say, that's true for me. That's true for me. That's true for me. I mean, you watch movies about like The Revenant, Leonardo DiCaprio's running through the woods and killing bears and sleeping inside of dead animals. And you're like, this movie speaks to me. Like, what? but that's how great communication works. It gets incredibly specific and to the human experience of one person, and then everybody else goes, that's real, that's alive, and that's me. And so imagine that one person on the other side of the camera, and preach directly to him, directly to her, and then watch as everybody else goes, man, Pastor, man, you were preaching right to me through my cell phone on Sunday.
Yeah, that is a huge point, because I was just thinking, how many music acts do we follow, or people do we listen to their music on repeat, and there's not one thing about their life we could relate to, and yet we feel like we relate with every song, like, a Taylor Swift or a Johnny Cash or a, trying to give you a more manly example after I threw out Taylor Swift there.
No need to. I'm man enough to admit that I was listening to a Dolly Parton song this morning with like tears in my eyes. You're like, this woman gets me.
So
well, and to that point, when we're preaching, we're sharing a hope that is universally applicable across generations, across cultures. I mean, like you said earlier, Chris, the message hasn't changed. The medium we're using to deliver the message has changed.
Right. And
so by being specific, you're allowing people to see these, bigger truths.
Like I started, it's funny. I've, in just thinking about preaching to the live stream and how it's actually changed where I allot my prep time. and like it's thinking through a question that you're going to ask people that's not as magnetic as it could be, and not as like dramatic as it could be, or just a question that really compels people to respond. That takes time. I've found myself like going back to watch my previous messages, and usually I'll listen to previous messages that I've done just to kind of like, okay, where was my cadence? Did I smack my lips? Did I say too much? But now when I'm listening, I'm going, okay, when I'm going back and reviewing my messages, and this is something I would encourage people to do, the last 2 weeks that you've preached here is go, okay, well, where could I have asked a question? And what could that, and like, so like some questions that have been really good for me where I'm like, man, live streaming has changed this for me. It's questions like, if you were in this story, how would you respond? When you read that, what word or phrase stands out to you? Type that in the comments below. When you're in situations like this, do you A or B? Type the letter A or B. Which one do you do? Or on a scale of 1 to 5, are you like 1 or are you a 5? Hit a 1 or hit a 5. And I don't, Facebook, if you use it natively, you can use polls, but like it's forced me to rethink how I can ask questions. And then when I engage with the answers, what I'll do is I'll go, if you were in the crowds that followed Jesus, where would you be? Would you be right in the back, kind of with your arms crossed, watching and trying to take it in? Or would you be right up front, reaching forward to touch him? Where would you be in the crowds? Would you be in the back, in the middle, or up front? Type your answers in below. And while you're typing your answers, I'll give you my answer and where I would be. And the reason I'm doing that is because there's a 15 to 30 second delay, depending on the platform you use. And so while that delay is coming in and people are, the delay is happening, I'm giving my answer. And then when I'm done giving my answer, I go, well, let me see some of your answers. Jamie, you said this. And oh my goodness, Nancy, you said that. That's, that's really good. Mm-hmm. And now we're doing this thing called a conversation, which is what live streaming is when it's most dynamic. And that's really embracing the medium for what it is. It's asking for that feedback. That's what Facebook wants us to do. So let's play by the rules let's play by the rules that they set forth. But it's forced me to think, to look back on my messages and with a different eye, and to spend more time in preparing my messages with different things.
Keep in mind too that most of the New Testament is made up of remotely delivered sermons. It's sermons that were written from afar by Paul to people or a person that he was not in the same room with, right? And so in some way, this is not new for the church. Perhaps there's something we can learn from the New Testament in terms of what it means to exhort, to encourage, to convict, to preach to people with whom we're not sharing the same space. Maybe there's something to learn there. And you also notice that there's specificity in those messages. People are named by name. People are called out. Examples are used from the people he knows who are going to be in the room listening when that sermon is read by the elders to those people who are going to be listening. So maybe there's something to be learned from there too.
That's really cool. And I want to hit this because there's some great chat going on in our comments section. Paul Nelson said, we have more traditional worship. We've had some concerns that the comments are distracting. Is the best way to go about those concerns to say this isn't how normal worship goes? It helps people engage in worship, and to help them swipe away the comments for those that it's distracting. How do you address those concerns?
This is complete irony, but I watched Paul Nelson's broadcast last night. They did a midweek one and I just jumped on it. And Paul, I'll be honest, none of those comments were distracting at all. It actually brought me deeper into the experience, because I was like seeing, I was interacting with other people in the room, and I felt like I was a part of something. So this morning we had a guy who hate speech filled up our prayer line, and we, mute, hide, delete, ban. But unless it's, I don't think it's distracting. My default would be like, let it go, let it be a part of the conversation.
Because too, what you're telling people when you allow for those questions, when you allow for those comments and conversations, is that this is a space where we can have this conversation. This is a church where you can wrestle with those things. And we live in a very skeptical, doubt-oriented kind of culture. And we're all living through something new together. And so to be able to step into that space well together as a church is a powerful thing. And doing little things like the comments and changing some of the dynamics we use in preaching are a lot of indicators that, hey, the church is with you in this.
Yep.
We don't have all the answers, but we're walking with you in it. We have the most important answer, and we'll walk with you through the rest.
Yeah,
No, I
people are
think
going
that's
to see people are going to see names that are familiar to them, and that's a source of comfort for a lot. It could be distracting, but I would argue that it's more of a source for comfort for people than it is a distraction for others. Because when they see names that they haven't been able to be in the same room with pop up on Facebook and go, oh hey, they just joined in watching, and then they start talking with each other in the comments. If that's distracting, I think that is digital fellowship. That is a beautiful thing, and it's so needed right now. And so I would encourage them to maybe change their settings or whatever, so that maybe they see some of that personally a little less. But I'd perhaps pastorally help them reframe it and see it as people are dying for connection, and when they see someone join the watch party on Facebook or leave a comment, it's a way to connect with someone that they can't connect with otherwise.
Yeah, and I think that's huge, Matt, because what my people miss the most about live worship is greet and connect. Being able to go over and shake somebody's hand, to give them a hug. They miss the opportunity to sit in the sanctuary after the service and to talk about life and what that message meant for them. So when you're doing it on the digital platform, you're offering them that opportunity, and I think that's huge.
It's been helpful for me to think of the beginning of the service as not the beginning of the service. To think of the beginning of the service as the narthex or the lobby of the church, letting people connect, letting people talk, and just they love being with each other. So building that space into the service flow. This isn't preaching, so we're but like in the service flow, not just the countdown, the actual beginning of the service. Where you're checking in from, and make sure you type that in. And if you're watching with people, hit those likes and hearts, whatever it is. Create that lobby time, and then have your beginning in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. But build that into your service, because people are looking for that, and that might be a way to mitigate some of those offhand comments during the message and stuff.
Yeah, and I think too, when you're telling them what to comment about, like, hey, answer this question. You're really starting to frame for people the conversation, and so that can also help mitigate some of that. Versus, because look, the comments section, if you're going through Facebook, it's up there whether you want it there or not. YouTube, it's up there with oh my
gosh,
you can't change that, so you can either lean into it and help people use it better, or you can ignore it, but it's not going away, kind of thing. So let me ask you guys, what are some of your favorite resources that you're using to enhance the live stream message?
Matt, so I was like lurking on your stuff 2 weeks ago, and I'm like, oh, I like his third. I'm going to do that. Or not your third. I guess whatever you call it, when you have like the pop up on the news anchor kind of pop up on over your shoulder.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh dude, I like that better than the full screen. I'm going to do, but all those overlays and all of that kind of animated stuff, it can be a simple picture that you make in Photoshop, export as a PNG with a blank background. And then I honestly just take 1 hour and learn a free software called OBS. It's probably it's the kind of the entry level one. There's some other stuff that you can pay for, and there's some other free ones, but OBS is kind of the most universal, and it has the most tutorials online and the most like quick videos of how to do. So, but just take an hour and learn OBS. There is a learning curve, but after that, you will be able to do overlays on your messages. You'll be able to do lower thirds. You'll be able to add countdowns and watermark logos and all the things that going back to that YouTube analogy of that 7 seconds that they say every 7 seconds you can change something. That makes it a lot easier, because now I'm going to, like this last week, it was, we talked about the God we need when life isn't what we want. And we started by we highlighted just a section, and then we changed the text of the God you need into the God you want. And it was just a simple button, but that one little shift just re-engaged them. And it was like just another thing that made them say, okay, I'm still here. I'm still here. And it's like, you need those little touch points spread and scattered throughout the message. Because otherwise they're going to abandon, and they're going to hurt your retention rates.
Yeah. I would say, the thing that's been helpful for me is just looking at the work that my fellow pastors are doing around the country, and stealing ideas from as many people as possible, and being encouraged by them.
Mhm.
And it's also tempting when I look at what other people are able to pull off in this day and age, be like jealous of their setup or different things. But that's just my own sanctification I got to work on. But instead, rather than focus on what we can't do, watching other people's live stream sermons and saying, what of what they're doing can I perhaps fold into what I'm doing? And just saying, look, I have the opportunity here, looking at what my brothers are doing in this and kind of standing on the shoulders of giants and making myself a little taller, and just seeing that that Chris is doing this, or that Matt Peeples is doing this, and trying to learn from as many people as possible and fold in something that's different and perhaps more engaging each and every week. That's really what I've been doing. And it's been really encouraging also to just listen to some of the great preaching and some of the innovative leadership that's happening among my fellow pastors.
Yeah, I think it's been really cool to kind of go around and watch. In fact, when I was watching the Points living room live stream, because I wanted to see that setup, and I loved that setup. And they played a video creed. So instead of doing like the creed, like everybody reads it together, they had a video that walked through all the words of the creed, and the visuals were like incredibly engaging. And so I just reached out and said, "Hey, where'd you get that video? Can we get a copy of that?" And so I've been using stuff like Igniter Media and Worship House Media, which we've used a lot in the past. Also, open.life.church has a lot of great resources. But I've been using some of those videos as kind of a way to be almost the intro to the message. So what it does is it breaks up the reading. It allows me to have this really big, engaging kind of open to the message that I can then step into and kind of build off of. So instead of like, normally what I would do is I'd start a message with prayer. Look, the reality is we're praying a ton throughout the service already, and I've been praying a lot for that message. So if it helps people to stay engaged by me going right from the video into the message, I'm doing that. And we've been able to really create some incredible opens that draw people in and help with that connection point, but are also things that we don't have to kind of produce on our own. Because anytime you're talking about media when it comes to worship, you've got a triangle you have to think about. You've got quality, you've got time, and you've got resources. Quality, time, and resources. And if you think about that in a triangle, you are generally only going to get two of those pieces, and you're going to have to sacrifice the third to get it. So for example, I want this really high quality video for the open of my message. I'm either going to have to spend a ton of time making it myself, if I can make it myself. And maybe I spent a ton of time making it and a ton of resources making it, but the quality wasn't that great. So I sacrificed the quality, or I have to spend some money to be able to get the high quality video I want, but it's not taking me a lot of time. And so you can kind of factor those things in when you're thinking about some of these things that you're doing. Because sometimes what I've had to say is, hey, this would be a great idea, maybe another time. Like maybe I have to scale back my idea so I can just bring about a better message than the bigger picture I've got kind of in my head.
Yep. And that triangle to keep in mind is really, really helpful, Matt. And there are some, I mean, you listed off some of the best ones. There's some incredible resources out there where you can get stuff, if not free, for really cheap, that can help elevate the production level of what you're doing. We've been using videos from Worship House Media for our kids ministry moments. So we've had leaders from our kids ministry film, just like selfie style, some videos to emphasize a particular Bible point and introduce that video, and then we cut to that video that we downloaded and purchased off of Worship House Media. So they're still seeing the leader from kids ministry say, "Hey kids, here's what I want you to take away from this video this morning, and take a look at this." And then we cut to that video, and we have a children's sermon right in the middle of the service.
That's cool.
That's huge. That's huge.
Hey, one other resource too for, I don't know where you got your, where'd you get your jam and track, man, for the countdown? Where did you get that?
That was Igniter Media.
Okay. Yeah. So I was going to say that we have to be careful on the music we use and stream. And if it's royalty free and if you paid for the royalties on it and stuff, but Facebook has a great library of royalty free music that you can add and download. And so then you don't have to worry about at all if you're going to get flagged or dinged for using somebody else's music because you're using music that they've pre-approved. And so that's what we've been doing for our pre-services, just using stuff from the Facebook royalty free library.
That's super smart.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Because the last thing you want to have is get it taken down. I mean, like, oh my gosh, then you're just like that's the worst thing in the world is get your video flagged and removed.
Yeah. And something we're going to do, I know we threw out like 1 million links for you guys. Our amazing communications coordinator, Susan, is compiling all those things together. She's going to send you guys out an email blast that you can get if you're watching this and you're watching it later. You can jump on www.lifeofachurchplanner.com and you can get that same link along with the webinar kind of replay to be able to watch it. But yeah, I think that's huge. So man, we've covered a lot. I'm sure your guys' heads are spinning. But are there any other last comments or questions that you guys would add or encourage preachers in this season?
Someone in the Q&A, this is just a really practical thing I'll respond to. Someone in the Q&A asked for tips about lighting. And the most basic tip for lighting is that if you have a strong light source in the room that you're streaming from, that you're filming in, you want that light source behind the camera shining on you, not behind you shining on the camera, right? Because that'll make the background really bright and you really dark. If you want to do some kind of more professional lighting setup, you can go to Amazon and you can buy LED lights on stands that can help light you. And you might think it's overkill, but when you set it up and use it in the shot, it looks really good. And the way you want to set that up is you want to have 2 lights in front of you on a 45. If possible, you want to have a light behind you that's also shining on your head to make yourself distinct from your background. But so if you have 3 lights, 2 on you at a 45, and then 1 behind you shining this way on your head and your shoulders so that you'll separate from your background and make sure that there's no giant bright window behind you, you'll have great lighting in your shot.
Yeah, and those lights are actually pretty cheap to get online, and you'll see some of them. They've got like the big black kind of like box around it. It's kind of called a soft box, so you don't get like the harshness of the light. It like kind of diffuses it out. The other thing, especially if you're somebody that like you're using a phone maybe to be able to like capture the whole service or at least your message. They've got these great things on Amazon, these circle lights that literally it's like the phone sits inside the circle light stand. And
the newer Ring. Yeah. Awesome.
All those social media superstars that you see with these amazing shots all the time, they're usually using the Ring light, but that's an incredible tool too. And a lot of the stuff can like ship to you even today, like within a couple of days. Yeah. So you could utilize that pretty quickly.
My closing thought, I'm glad you asked the question because I'm dying to share this with as many people as possible. Honestly, I'm like screaming from the rooftops. The internet has really, really struggled lately. I like pulled some stats for some other research I was doing, and I was like, oh my gosh, these numbers. Because I was like going, why is our feed not working? Why is Facebook like glitching? And then the abandon rates are going through the roof, and like it's so disheartening to spend all this time and to find out like half that it was latent for people. And so this last week we hosted on our website, but we were just testing it, so we didn't broadcast it. And we lost people again but it was flawless on our website, but Facebook was a train wreck. And then you read about like Church Online had major outages on their platform, and churches just didn't broadcast at all. And I'm sitting here going, the internet is really, really struggling. So I pulled some numbers. Listen to these numbers. Video streaming in the U.S. or on Facebook is up by 26% in the month of March. Just live video streaming is up 26%. Netflix usage is up at 47% in March. HBO Now is up 70%. And Zoom usage, like we're using right now, has quintupled in the month of March. And all of this is affecting your internet signal. And it's extremely important for us to go, we've got to prepare now, because imagine this, okay? If all of it, like if internet traffic is like highway traffic, right? And Sunday morning is rush hour traffic with a lane closure and everybody's being rerouted onto a new route that they normally don't take. So hubs, the networks have been built for like offices and universities. Those hubs aren't being used. Everyone's coming for residential now. And so it's just getting overloaded. And that's why Facebook is working for some people and not for other people, for some churches. And it's been a nightmare. And the thing that I'm screaming out right now is if this is what's been happening, on regular Sundays during social distancing. What is going to happen when Easter attendance doubles on Easter morning? Come Easter morning, there will be 2 times. I mean, just in your own church, you have twice as many people in your own church on Easter. These last 2 weeks, there are people in your congregation, I promise you, who haven't thought of going to church, but when Easter comes around, they're like, I'm going to go to church on Easter. And they're going to, and it will double. If this is what's happened regularly, what's going to happen when the traffic doubles? And so one of the best things that we did, and I'm so excited about this, is we upgraded our website from a shared server, and 90% of church websites are on shared servers. So like if you're on an Ecclesia website, or if you're on a Clover website, you're on a shared server. And just simply upgrading your website to a VPS, a virtual private server, means that you don't share your website with any other church. Because if churches on Easter say, well, Facebook's not working, let's redirect people, or YouTube is being glitchy, let's redirect people to our website. Now everybody's flooding those servers and hugging them to death. And people won't be able to get on your website either. And so my plea is to spend the extra $80 to $100 that's going to cost for 1 month to upgrade your church's website to a VPS, a private server. If you don't know how to do it, find someone in your congregation to do it. It takes 5 minutes. Upgrade for 1 month for $100 to guarantee that you have a usable private link on your website to stream your services, because Facebook is not going to be reliable. YouTube is not going to be reliable. And even if they are, you have your backup plan in place now. Please, please, please. I'm begging people to upgrade your website to a private server.
That is a brilliant thought. I'm actually gonna have my tech people look into that when we're done, because I feel, and we're kind of in a lucky position where, we're on the East Coast and we do service usually at 9 a.m. So I think the only reason we haven't had trouble is because we're beating everybody to it. But something to consider too, along with what Chris is saying, is you can easily blast it out to multiple platforms at the same time. And so we know Facebook's been glitchy. So what we've been doing is we're always shooting it out to YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and you can even do something as simple as like getting a paid Vimeo account. And a paid Vimeo account will allow you to stream to Vimeo, Facebook, and YouTube all simultaneously at the same time.
And your website. So we're using Vimeo for our website. Yeah.
And your website live. And so what you've done, and then what I would do is step into some of your chat features and just let people know, hey, if Facebook goes down, click this link and you can come over here. If YouTube goes down, click this link and you can come over here. Just kind of build in some kind of backup plans there live, and then communicate that to people beforehand, and you'll be in a much better position. Yeah, you guys, brilliant stuff. I would say, does anybody know on this call real quick, we'll hit the internet usage change, but what kind of upload speed should people be looking for? Or do people, if your church is like literally your home, like you should be okay with upgrading your speed. What should people look at upload speeds for their internet?
So if you just Google speed test and just go to a website and do a speed test, you should have, and your existing package should be able to accomplish 200 down, 20 up. So 200 download speed and a 20 upload speed. If you got that, you should be safe. And that brings up the other thing then, I am probably going to pre-record an entire service. In the incredible off chance that my internet doesn't work come Easter morning for some reason, at least we have something we can press play on. And I think a lot of churches are doing that, of having a backup to the backup plan. So, but that would actually prevent all of the internet speed, frustration on Sunday morning. If something happens and your internet's not working, the church has to go on. It's Easter, man.
Yeah. And when you're streaming, this might sound really obvious, but when you're streaming something, the number that matters the most is your upload speed, not your download speed. And your upload speed, no matter what your device tells you, is going to be slower if you're accessing it over wireless. So if at all possible, when you're streaming, connect directly by Ethernet cable into your router. If you don't have an Ethernet port on your laptop or whatever it is that you're using, buy an adapter, get on Amazon right now. make sure that you're hardwired in, if at all possible, so that you know you're maximizing your upload speed when you're streaming. That's really, really important. For us, we're working on the assumption that Facebook and YouTube are just not going to be trustworthy on Easter morning. And so what we are doing is we are pre-recording our Easter services. We're putting a little more production value into those. And then we are going to premiere those on Facebook and YouTube at 9 a.m. and then 10:30 a.m. But then we are streaming that same pre-recorded service 7 different times on our website, and that's where we're pointing the community. So we've bought a URL, easterforhouston.com, and we're going to be streaming. We're going to be doing a simulated live stream at 7:30, 9, 10:30, noon, all until about 7 o'clock at night.
And when you're doing your simulated live stream, are you doing that through the online platform that allows you to upload video? Yeah. And what is that one again?
So we use a service called Stream Monkey, and it's a pretty robust streaming service. And what they do is they take the video that you've uploaded, either the video that you're uploading while you're live streaming, or the video you've uploaded in advance, and they transcode it from multiple bit rates, so that as someone is watching it on your website, and they have a really strong connection, it gives them the 4K signal because they've got the 5G. And then for your grandma who's got dial-up still, it gives her a lower resolution broadcast so that she can watch it still on her phone. And so it distributes it and offers multiple bit rates via what's called live transcoding, so that whoever's accessing it from your website can see it at a quality level that works for their internet connection. And so they then give you the embed code to put in your website. So what we'll do is we'll take our Easter service, and on Saturday afternoon, Holy Saturday afternoon, we'll upload that service to Stream Monkey, and then we'll set it to stream as if it's live, so meaning people can't rewind and fast forward, and at all those different times through that same embed code that's going to be on our website. At the same time, we will have uploaded it to Facebook and YouTube, and it will be set to premiere at 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. on both Facebook and YouTube.
That's awesome. That's brilliant. So definitely those are things to check out. We're going to throw all those links into the PDF. Guys, thank you so much for taking the time to be a part of this. What I'd like to do is just encourage you guys, like, just whatever you do, get out there, stream the gospel, because it's going to change lives. And at our last webinar, we ended with a prayer. And since we're coming up on Easter, man, what a time to end with a prayer. So if you guys would, please pray with me. Dear Lord, thank you so much that we would be able to take this time, Lord, to just be able to dig into preaching, to learn how we can navigate this new medium, Lord, to bring a message that you brought 2,000 years ago, God, and is still changing lives today. Lord, I pray that you would strengthen us in this task, and that you would allow us, Lord, anytime that we stream, God, to be conscious that there's somebody on the other end whose life needs to be changed. And I pray somebody's life would be changed because the preachers that got on this webinar, Lord, figured out how to get that message out in these new mediums. It's in your name, Lord Jesus, by your strength we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Guys, thanks a bunch. For more webinars, go to www.lifeofchurchplanner.com, and you can catch any of the backup webinars we've got. And of course, till next time, it's been a joy seeing you guys right here on the webinar.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.